Welcome to the Infinity Stone podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt. With me is my co-host,
Eddie. Here I am.
Yeah, see? So we're back together again, and we're here this week to talk about Spider-Man Far From Home. And Andy, why are you dressed as Spider-Man?
I don't know what you're talking about, dude. I mean, it's red, but
It must. Yeah, I must. Anyway, yeah. So Andy, we're talking Spider-Man Far From Home sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming, which we liked a lot. And okay, seriously, man, what the hell's going on there?
there's nothing going on. I mean, if you're referring to the fact that like there's no chyrons on the screen anymore, I figure we should probably bring that up. This is the second podcast in a row. We used to do the gag with like our names and stuff. That was taken away from us by Google, and it's not happening, which is too bad because I felt like this movie gave us a lot to work with. You know, like you could be Night Monkey, or loves Led Zeppelin, or even Dead. I'm still the hero. Like things like that would have been fun.
Yeah, but that was sure that yeah. So Far From Home, sequel to Homecoming, and as always, I'm just gonna ask you what. Okay, seriously, man, what is going on?
Matt, are you having trouble telling the difference between reality and illusion or something? I actually don't know. Are you pranking me? Is that what's happening here? All right. I think it's time. We had some fun with Matt there, did we not, guys? But it's time to reveal our Mysterio-like, deception. Yes, the Spider-Man really, truly are here. I'm not exactly sure what happened with the costume, though. A big piece of news is Spider-Man Far From Home was Christopher's first MCU movie in theaters. He sat still the whole time.
It was really impressive.
Did you enjoy the movie, Christopher?
Yes.
Yes. Would you recommend it for other kids going into grade 1?
Yes.
Yes. What did you like most about the movie? Or maybe most. I don't need you to rank your experiences. Life can be a thing. But what did you like about the movie? Do you remember the movie? It's been like 4 days. So much has happened since then.
I like the end credits.
You like the end credits. Well, I'm glad you were able to sit through them. Alex, what did you like best about the movie?
I like the fighting scenes and fighting Mysterio.
Like when he was fighting Mysterio?
Yeah.
And on the bridge, or like when it was all in his mind? All the illusions, I suppose.
All the illusions.
Yeah, did it kind of remind you of our Disney Infinity game? Yeah. Well, do you remember the Spider-Man part of Disney Infinity where Mysterio was changing his perception all the time? You've made me play it a lot. I hope you remember. Matt, do you have any questions for them? Maybe they respond to your questions better than mine.
I don't think that's going to happen.
All right. Well, what do you think? Should we go see another Spider-Man movie when they come out? Yes. All right, guys. I think that means it's time for you guys to go to bed. Say goodbye to everyone.
Bye. Bye.
And when we come back, Matt and I will probably use a few more words to discuss Spider-Man Far From Home.
Who is that guy?
He's like Iron Man and Thor rolled into one.
He's no Spider-Man.
What is it with you and Spider-Man?
What, he looks out for the neighborhood, has a dope suit, and I really respect him. Sup, dickwad?
And we're back, and now that we're not playing around anymore, Andy, let me ask the question I always begin with. What did you think of this movie?
I think the Spider-Man movies are delightful, and I just enjoy being in their company, and I'm ready for more. And this was no exception to that. I think more than anything, Marvel understands how to make these movies, and obviously, I mean, in their whole universe, but even these Spider-Man movies, fun. They know what the audience wants, and they deliver.
Okay.
Yourself?
I'm gonna be. This might surprise some, but I was kind of disappointed in this movie. Now, maybe that's because I liked Homecoming so much that my expectations might have been higher than most. But I found myself, I mean, like, it was fine. It was fun, like, but I thought this was kind of like lower, well, not lower tier, like middle tier MCU movie. And I'll kind of get into why a bit later. But yeah, I just kind of found, and don't get me wrong, there was definitely stuff in here that was great, and I'll talk about that too. But overall, I was kind of disappointed in it.
Do you feel like, I don't know, I'm just now just guessing, maybe I'm completely off base why you feel this way or not, but this kind of seems to be something that this franchise has is, they build up to these big if you're looking at the franchise as a whole, the whole big damn MCU,
Sure.
they build up to these big things. And obviously this time it was, the Thanos and Infinity War Endgame back to back. And then with the last two ends of the phases, they've kind of had this lesser ambition film to kind of finish it off, right? And I wonder if, instead of this being like the second movie in a Spider-Man franchise, building off of that one, this one very much felt like kind of like the calming closing chapter to the bigger franchise. Do you think there's anything to that?
I do, but not in the way you're talking about. So this is why. So because this movie is serving the master of not just being a sequel to a previous Spider-Man movie and not just being a Spider-Man movie, but also closing out this entire chapter of the MCU, and also giving a road forward for the MCU, I felt that it had to adopt a tone that was not in the best interest of telling the most entertaining Spider-Man story it could have. So let me give an example here. One of the things I liked best about Spider-Man Homecoming was the fact that it was just charming as hell and extreme and pretty funny. I mean, there was other things that did well, but those two qualities kind of shone through. And I didn't think the jokes hit in this one, but I also didn't think there were as many of them. And the reason why was because this was kind of a more somber movie in a lot of places, because it wasn't just dealing with like a Peter Parker adventure, where he could then crack wise, but it was dealing with the death of Iron Man, and it was dealing with the MCU moving on. By the way, we're going to be talking about spoilers for Endgame too, so I hope you have seen that.
I mean, we wouldn't be the ones that spoiled you. If you've seen Far From Home, but not Endgame, you've already been spoiled, and it wasn't by us. Now, I suppose, yes. If you haven't seen either, I don't know. I mean, this is what we do here. At this point, you got to know. Right. You can't watch us as just a, hey, let's see what the movie's about.
It's just a reflex at this point to, give the spoiler warning even after I spoil it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so in that instance, I think that the fact that this is closing out this chapter of the MCU in many ways led to a creative decision that I found disappointing with what I wanted from my Spider-Man. I wanted kind of the more charming, funny Spider-Man, rather than the serious Spider-Man. And I felt like we got more serious Spider-Man this time than the charming, funny Spider-Man. But it's also funny because the part of the movie I liked a lot better was the second half of the movie when there's really no jokes. And so it's pretty much after the twist is really when. So there is some jokes, but they're all coming from Jake Gyllenhaal and not from.
Or Happy Hogan, right?
Or Happy. So that part of the movie I thought was fantastic. I don't. It's just that I felt like the two didn't always graph well together, and the more serious tone I didn't think really fit what I was looking for in a Spider-Man movie. So I think it's as much a personal disappointment as it is I think these were actual flaws in the movie.
That's interesting because I mean I know what you're saying about the serious moments. I don't feel like they outpace the funny moments. And in fact, skipping ahead a bit to what biggest flaws, I actually felt like a flaw, maybe not the biggest one, is that this movie didn't deal with the implication of things that it touches upon very well. It touches on serious things, but it doesn't really want to go there. Now, one part of calling that a flaw is just that I don't know if I want it to go there either, right? That's not what I'm looking for in a Spider-Man movie. But if you think about it, it's so they're dealing with the blip and the death of Iron Man. So the blip they do in a kind of clever and humorous way at the very beginning with the kid, the high school kid made video.
That was a great joke, and I thought that was a good way of dealing with it.
Yeah, and then they briefly have May, talking about the homelessness or whatever, and then that's kind of it, other than a few gags here or there. And it's this isn't really dealing with they don't deal with the fact that Peter was dead.
Right.
I mean, obviously,
he doesn't seem to have the existential crisis you would imagine from someone who just came back from the dead.
Yeah, and obviously, he didn't feel it. One moment he was awake, and then next minute he was awakening it again. And I guess also nobody in his life really felt it. So I suppose there's that. But yeah, so they don't deal with that. They don't, the blip video talks about the other Avengers dead, but nobody else in the world seems to. Every other tribute is only about Iron Man, despite the fact that the movie itself reminds us Captain America, Black Widow, and Vision too. But it's I get that Peter is more about the Iron Man death because he's the only one that he really interacted with, other than a fight in an airport, right? But there should have been a few Captain America memorials here or there too, and it's just so these are major kind of implications and drama, and frankly great opportunities for melodrama, which I think is very plays very well into both teenagers and Spider-Man, but the movie didn't really do well with those. So I think maybe in the sense that it's not that there was so much of it, but what there was of it didn't justify it necessarily.
Yeah, and I think that is true, because well done serious moments are certainly nothing that those are not things I shy from. Those are things I want in movies. But like you said, we had some serious themes here, but they were only just kind of introduced to be touched upon, but they weren't developed. And so the one big theme of the movie, though, was who's the next Iron Man? Right. If there's any theme to this movie, it's, is Peter Parker the next Iron Man? Right. And so that idea is kind of threaded throughout, and it kind of works because that plays into his teenage angst and his insecurity. But I also don't love that idea for Spider-Man anyway, which is, I guess, another conversation that we have teed up for a bit later. So I might be jumping the gun there.
Yeah, it's really getting difficult to segment this show because it's all there, because absolutely that is something we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, just in general terms, if that's the major theme and it's a theme that, I don't know if I really care about, then that will hurt the movie. Whereas for me, it's I see those things, and we'll get into them. But I still feel like it was mostly still the frothy, fun stuff, and I think by evidence, I think people who don't care at all about those things have reported back to me that they've enjoyed it, So we're talking about the humor. I thought Ned and Betsy was just this great running gag throughout.
Okay, yeah, that was a great running gag, absolutely.
I thought the Peter and MJ stuff was pretty strong. I think there should have been more of it, but
yeah,
I think what we
I agree.
Was good.
The problem that I would have with the Peter and MJ stuff was that there wasn't enough of it, and a lot of time is devoted to Peter and Brad. And the Peter and Brad stuff, I thought fell kind of flat for me. It was a good initial joke that the scrawny pipsqueak that you remember as a middle schooler is now a handsome high school dude or whatever. Yeah. But I thought the whole gag of him taking the picture of him and him calling the drone on him, I could have done without those.
The picture was funny. The drone gets into another part. I'll just discuss now because I have a different flaw that we can talk about for real.
Sure.
The lines of not being prepared, tonally, to deal with the implications that it gets into. Edith is messed up. The entire concept of Edith is what Captain America was fighting in Winter Soldier.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's basically Tony Stark is okay, so I create Ultron, and that was a big mistake. So let me do something kind of similar, but
less AI. It still has to respond to some commands. I mean, whoever's wearing the glasses command, but still someone's command.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, but I'll be in control of it unless I die, in which case I'm going to give it to a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah,
what the hell?
Will have the power to just hand it off via voice command. Whatever. And frankly, it continues the blatant insanity of what he's done for this 16-year-old kid, including a suit with instant kill mode that can be hacked by a high schooler with a USB cable. Edith is what's different between Edith and the Tri-Helicarrier? I guess just volume. That's
bad news. It was the thing that our hero was railing against. And in this movie, it's mostly just played up for jokes until, it becomes a tool of the villain. So it's just like, you're implicating some seriously bad stuff. And and like that's just the violence part of it. But being able to hack into anybody's cell phone, that's bad. Very bad.
Hey, remember when Dark Knight did that in 2008? And everyone was like, yo, that's not cool. And even Batman at the end was like, hey, this is probably not cool, but Lucius, you make the decision here. Should we destroy it? And he destroys it. Because, right, it's messed up.
Yeah, no. Captain America takes down all of S.H.I.E.L.D. because of Hydra. But that was like just in your own universe. Mm-hmm. And then they're just like, hey. And part of it is because they need a way for Mysterio to be able to do what Mysterio does on a grander scale. So like, okay, we'll invent that. And then they also need a way to connect, or at least they feel like they need a way to connect Tony to the goings on, what's going on here, and Peter. And then, of course, Peter there. And like the role Edith plays in like Mysterio's plan, A+, But
I thought that was great. I mean, one of the things I like about these Spider-Man movies is that so far the villains are all of these like, these villains that were created by Tony Stark's negligence, basically. By him being an unthinking a-hole, like he creates the Vulture, he creates Mysterio. Mm-hmm. And it's also like they're taking these kind of classically goofy Spider-Man villains and they're finding a way to kind of make them fit into this more real MCU, but that doesn't take away their kind of like goofy. It doesn't take away like some of the goofy charm of them. Like Mysterio still had the fishbowl helmet.
Yeah, let's get to that because I loved Mysterio so much, and straight down to the look. They're doing Mysterio, and they full on did Mysterio. Like they didn't quite give him the eyes on the side, but he still has symbols there. Yep. Oh my god, just like the satisfaction of the movie being like, no, we're doing Mysterio, and we're doing Mysterio all the way. Yeah, that enough would buy me, love and affection for this movie. Plus the continued affection of Tom Holland as Peter Parker, and the goofiness of his friends and stuff. But I loved everything they did with Mysterio.
I mean, like even though it sounds like I dislike this movie, the main reason that I didn't dislike the movie is because Mysterio was so great. Like, he's by far the best part of the movie. And again, that's with me loving the Tom Holland portrayal of Spider-Man, but Jake Gyllenhaal stole the freaking show here. Like,
but also like they call him Mysterio.
How many like actual superheroes in this universe do they actually call by codename? Because they don't call them all that way. Are we going to actually talk about that later?
No. There's just one last tiny minor implication that this movie wasn't prepared to deal with. Peter Parker just named Carol Danvers' character in the entire MCU. He's like, hey, what about Captain Marvel when he's trying to get out of the job? She's never been called that. She's never referred to herself with that. And in her own movie, in the Avengers movie, like that, and all of a sudden Peter Parker knows what her code name is.
Well, that's probably because the writer director of this movie didn't see Captain Marvel, but he did know about what happened in Endgame. Amusingly enough,
but only sketches of it. Yeah, this is just minor, but I wonder if like in the future they'll still play this whole thing where they never call her Captain Marvel, or they just like act like it and just no. Anyway, that was just a minor thing. I
didn't even notice that, but that's a good.
Well, no, because it's so minor, right? But then it's like, wait, nobody's called her, because I think I brought this up 2 movies ago. If not, I intended to. That barely anybody's ever referred to. Like Hawkeye has been maybe like once. What you mean, the Hawk? Or as his kid was Hawkeye. Like they're not referred to by their names much, but in this universe they are. Mysterio is Mysterio.
I mean, Iron Man is, the Hulk is, Captain America is,
Thor obviously because it's his name, but
but not everyone is.
Like Scarlet Witch, I don't think has ever been called Scarlet Witch.
I don't think so.
I don't know if Wasp has ever been called Wasp either, really. Or at least not the second version. Maybe her mom was. I think
the idea. Her mom definitely was, now that I can think about it. But
And obviously Ant-Man always has been. But yeah, it's just so that was just a tiny thing. But yeah, just like I always loved like the idea of Mysterio as a kid, like even like from the Spider-Man cartoons, frankly, mostly from the Spider-Man cartoons, because I didn't read a lot of Spider-Man comics. I believe that one is the only Mysterio comic I've ever read, or Spider-Man Mysterio, I should say. They tried to make him serious once in a Daredevil series, which I enjoyed back in the early 2000s, but now I'd be like, anyway, but yeah, just like, crazy illusions, things go on. Like, it's just such a fun concept for a supervillain. And, many years when they were doing superhero movies, especially pre-MCU, Mysterio would be like a hero or a villain, that would be dismissed as like, too goofy. You can't do stuff like that.
Well, so they almost did him. And I think we discussed this when we were talking about Homecoming. So they had plans to do Mysterio in the opening segment of Raimi's of Spider-Man 4, which never got off the ground. And it was going to be played by Bruce Campbell, which the disappointment, the fact I never got to saw that, was somewhat, assuaged by the fact that we actually got a good Mysterio. Yeah. But I really would have loved to see Bruce Campbell play Mysterio.
Yeah, and in that universe too. But even there, in the opening segment, that tells me that they do not believe that Mysterio is somebody who could carry a whole movie. And I gotta say, even at the time, I was like, you know what? Like, just to get some other Spider-Man villains that maybe wouldn't be able to carry a whole thing. Yeah, an opening segment would be a great way. Just have him take down Electro at the beginning and then get into the bigger story. But I like that. No, a whole movie about Mysterio and very believable motivations that tie into this universe. A very believable character. His trick didn't get old, even though it went a few times. Helped by the fact, like in most Spider-Man stories, they don't know it's a trick until a little later on. No, it's just delightful, and it's just I'm happy that we are at this place in superhero movies that they're just like, no, we're just doing it, man. We're doing the whole thing, fishbowl and all.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. It was great. So let me ask you this. Spider-Man Homecoming was frequently compared to a John Hughes film, right? It was like it had that kind of teen comedy type of thing. Do you think Far From Home compares to any type of, like movie or type, or movie in particular?
Yeah, not movie necessarily, although possibly a movie I haven't seen. But watching it gave me the feel of like when a TV series does the, trip
European Vacation?
Yeah. Now, again, European Vacation might be the same one. I've actually never seen European Vacation. Also, that whole franchise is about going on vacation. So, the only difference there is like, they talk a little funnier here. But even just like, everybody's away from home. They're doing weird things. It reminds me, the Friends going to, London or Vegas. Or like, I have this memory and I can't tell for sure if it is something that actually happened or my childhood brain made it happen. But I think it did. That there was like a Family Ties special where they went to Europe and they got mixed up in some spy espionage stuff because Alex B. Keaton's like bag had like a brush that had a microfiche in it mixed up, and just like weird, like it felt like growing up every show had that, and I'm sure most of it they went forever and they need to do something different, and it's just that's the whole vibe. It's like, hey, it's the gang, but hey, they do things a little different here, and there's those kind of gags and stuff, and way I'm saying it makes it sound, like hacky and cliche, but I say like I dug it. I dug seeing, Flash have, get, pantsed at the, in Venice and stuff like that.
Yeah, no. So I had been kind of struggling to think of exactly what it reminded me of. Your comparison, I think, is actually quite good, and maybe that's what I was thinking of. But I also think it's like a genre that I've seen parodied more often than I've seen the actual thing, because I think like this is a well-known like parody and trope that people make fun of. Like, you go on like you go on the big vacation or whatever. But I can think of like the stuff making fun of it, like as you said, The Simpsons. I can't think of like the actual examples of it. And so maybe it is a TV thing. Maybe it was like an 80s TV thing. And so, you had like Family Ties or Married with Children or something, like go to Europe. In fact, I actually think Married with Children did go to like Italy once. Now that I'm trying to think about this, but so you would have like those rather than it being a movie thing, like, John Hughes movies. Now, obviously, we brought up Vacation. Like, it does have some resemblance to like National Lampoon a bit.
Yeah.
But I'd say not that much. But,
so I thought of a movie besides the Vacation, and basically what it is the reason why it's not leaving a mind why television is the thing that thinks of is it's the movie you go to after you've kind of exhausted a lot of your the potential of your traditional setting, and and this isn't the first time we've made comparisons between the MCU and television, because the same deal. Second Spider-Man movie, but the MCU movies are like, what can we do? We filmed every square inch of this Atlanta soundstage. What else can we do? So another movie that kind of probably did this because they just had so many is like Police Academy, when they like go to Moscow or something.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you got to look for, is like franchises that just extend so long they can do that. They're just like, well, we need something else. How about the same jokes but somewhere else?
Right? Yeah. No. Exactly. So yeah, I didn't think it was as close an homage as Homecoming was. Homecoming was like very interested in getting the feel of those John Hughes movies, whereas this was kind of more of a kind of broader homage, and perhaps not to anything more specific. So and so because of that, it's like this is definitely something, but I'm not sure what.
And I gotta say, like, I think done well. That sort of vibe done well. Let's see our characters in this other thing. Let's see what happens with Peter. It also does capture like a teenage experience. Not all teenagers have the privilege of going to Europe, but even just like that time away from home, where you get to kind of have a taste of independence and all that. Obviously, the teacher chaperones are there to varying levels of success, but it's still that. Because frankly, that's like a thing that most young person storytelling has to overcome, is why aren't the young people being parented more? Right. Disney solves this by killing parents always. But and then other teen fiction, either just ignores that teenagers can't be out at all hours, or they also create worlds where they're not around. This helps accomplish that. There aren't a lot of adult figures, so the teens get off to their hijinks. And I enjoyed the hijinks. Frank, again, more hijinks would have been better.
Yeah. And just thing, and I think the other thing is just like more of these teen characters, because one of the things that was so great about Spider-Man Homecoming was that this surrounding cast of characters is a ton of fun. Ned and MJ and Flash, and in this movie Betty are like all just like, they're fun characters. They have fun chemistry, and they're really good with Tom Holland. And so like, in a way, I almost felt like we got shortchanged of them, even though like they all had plots, like they're all in the movie, but it definitely felt like we got less of them than I would have liked.
How did you feel about the fact that like everybody that seemed to know him also got snapped?
I didn't care. I did not care at all. I mean, like, it would have been funny if like suddenly Ned was 5 years older, but then you would have the problem of like, well, Ned's going to be in college. And then you would lose Ned. So, it would be, like you could get like one good joke if you had someone that actually aged up 5 years, but you would lose one of the best parts of this franchise, and that would not be a good thing. Like we want, though, like I bet Vulture's daughter didn't get snapped because I think she was already older. And then like you could have her come back at some point. And
it would finally be explained why she was 2 feet taller than everybody.
Right, exactly.
It was a thing that got commented a lot, especially when the trailer dropped. And again, it's like, we're still just talking about 4 or 5 people, although Aunt May ended up being one of them, which I think was a good choice, because then we didn't have to deal with her reconciling her grief and relief and all of that. She didn't live through that either.
There was no way that Aunt May would let Peter Parker go to Europe if he had just returned from being snapped. Even if it was a year ago, you're clinging to that kid as close as you can after them being dead for 5 years.
Yeah. And it's just like, oh, well, what a crazy coincidence. It's 50%. It's really not that hard to get not. Like 6 people. Half the class. That's a lot. And like, frankly, like every Guardian but one was snapped out, and nobody had an issue, even though they're all different races. Like, I don't even know, thinking about it, isn't Groot the only one of his kind? Shouldn't he not have been snapped? But again, but so yeah, it's like, that's what happens when it's half. If it's like 2% or like the leftovers, what was that, 5% or something?
Yeah.
Then it is a crazy coincidence that spoiler. Okay, I won't even spoiler, but like one person's family was all snapped out, or like everybody in a town or something, or everybody in a town wasn't. But you're going to get that all the time, man. Whole families, no families, an entire airplane, half an airplane. Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah. Have you ever flipped a coin and it came up heads like 4 or 5 times in a row? Because that is actually a decent chance of happening. And that's basically what happened here. Like, it's really not crazy. And like, it wasn't his entire class, as you said, like, it was 4 or 5 people, and it just happened to be the 4 or 5 people that we care about because they're the ones we know. So actually, we've been kind of doing this already, but for you, how did it compare to Homecoming?
It's not as good. It's not. I think Homecoming was a tighter story. I think the introduction. I mean, it wasn't the full introduction. Obviously, we got him in Civil War, but really, the truly introduction to his world and all that was stronger than the reintroduction to, say, the post-blip world. I might like Mysterio better than Vulture from a fun standpoint. Like, I like what that movie was able to do with him. But as great as Jake Gyllenhaal was here, he's not as good as what Michael Keaton was able to deliver. And frankly, like right there, he was like, "Oh, I wish there was more of the fun stuff." This one was dragged down a bit by its more serious tones. I think both of us, when we were picking the best moments of Homecoming, each chose serious moments. I chose when Peter was able to fight his way off of being buried, and you chose
right, and I chose the overprotective father talk from Vulture.
Which probably, frankly, was the best moment in the film.
Oh, that's so good.
So and that just shows that it's probably less about that. It was just that those elements in Homecoming were just better done.
So, I mean, I think one of the biggest differences between Homecoming and this, because obviously my position that I think Homecoming is better than this should be pretty obvious by now. But I think one of the differences is that Homecoming just seemed like effortless. Like, it just seemed that but in like the best possible way. Like, everyone was like having fun. It was like charming. Michael Keaton could bring the gravitas, and not just when he was like in an action scene, but just like, he was just like bringing it when he was talking to people, which is why I love the overprotective father talk, because he was giving the same performance there, and it wasn't like in an action scene, but he was still threatening. But one thing that this movie had that Homecoming didn't was the fights in this movie were a lot more fun and frankly just a lot better. And they were. Spoiler alert, my favorite scene from this movie is going to be a fight scene, which, as we've discussed, is pretty rare for me. But it's also very obviously the best scene in this movie. But I mean, so like I think there was just like this kind of like effortless alchemy that kind of went into Homecoming. And sometimes that can be hard to recreate because that's like can be kind of the moment type of thing. Like everything is just kind of clicking right there. You're introducing the world, you're introducing the friends. I think the fact that he was in more of the Nick Fury world. Well, the Nick Fury world. Yeah, you got me. I think also hurt him. I think if, because then it pulls him into this more serious world and pulls him out of the teenage world. Yeah. Well, no, and just one of the joys of this Spider-Man is that he is younger than the other depictions we have seen in movies.
Yeah, and honestly, like that could have been mined for better, comedy, and that Nick Fury and company don't quite know what to deal with this kid, but it was more just like, and then obviously then Jake Gyllenhaal uses that to relate to him and such. And so, and just could be that the character doesn't bounce off as well with Maria Hill than it does with, Tony Stark. Right. But I think another thing is just like both movies, like the MCU elements felt a little intrusive, but I feel like probably in this one they were more important. The Iron Man intrusive moments in Homecoming, some paid off with some fun, but also they're like, they're not. We can take or leave them. They're not a big deal, In some ways, you could say that makes them more shoehorned, but it's also like something you could toss aside a little bit. Whereas with this movie, it's the plot. It's the driver of the action, so you can't totally dismiss them as much. And it's just like maybe what we would have wanted a bit more from a second Spider-Man movie. And I'm hoping this is where they're going to go with the third one, is like, let it be Spider-Man's movie.
And I do hope that's where they're going with the third one. But yeah, well, again, we have this discussion fully planned out for a bit later, so I want to still hold off on it a bit, though we're itching there. So let's get us there quicker. Let's go to break, and when we come back, we'll talk about our favorite sequences.
There's got to be someone else you can use. What about Thor?
Off-world.
Captain Marvel? Unavailable. But I'm just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Bitch, please, you've been to space.
So we're back. Okay, so best sequences. I'm going to go first because I think the choice is pretty obvious, but maybe it's not. And if you're going to surprise me, please feel free to do so. But my favorite sequence is the Mysterio fight, not the one at the end, but the one where he's like going full Mysterio and it's like the hallucination stuff.
That ends with him getting hit by a train.
Yeah. That was great. That was like everything I wanted from a Mysterio fight. That was like, that was like the best possible use of like the hallucination, fight. I love when it did start to like break a little bit at the end, but even that was part of the act, I love the way it was just like very dynamic in a way that some of their fight, like some of the MCU fights can really lack. Like this was allowed to be really creative and really fun. And it was just great.
Yeah, and it highlighted the benefits and the strengths of this goofy ass character Mysterio. Yeah. That it lets you go to places storytelling visually that, are pretty fun and exciting. And, that's a key to great villains is like, what kind of stories does this villain let you tell? And Mysterio lets you tell a lot of great ones. I think it highlighted it. I had one kind of significant issue with it. Just like overall, I liked what was happening. All this, just like one little piece of it. When Peter falls at the grave, I kind of hated that it was Tony Stark's grave. And I get why. This is a series that's never introduced Uncle Ben, but like there, it's kind of like this shouldn't be. We don't actually know, I guess. But that's not the most significant death in Peter's history. At the very least, we know his parents are dead.
Yeah, so I will justify this in this way. It's the death that's on his mind in this movie and at that time.
Actually, it's an even easier justification. It's the only death Mysterio knows about. I'm totally on board with it now.
Yeah, there you go. But it's also just like, if you think about like, what is Peter thinking about this entire movie? He's thinking about Iron Man this movie. He's not thinking about anyone else, and it's because everyone keeps talking to him about Iron Man. Everyone's like, "Oh, Tony Stark's dead. Are you the next, Iron Man?" And he's like, "No." But they're like, "Well, he gave you the glasses. I guess you're the next Iron Man." He's like, "What's going? No." So this is like what's on his mind. This is what's going through him. So like, to me, yeah, that's how he would process it. But you're right. That's the one Mysterio knows about too. The other thing was, I thought this scene, and I mean this not as a negative at all, I thought the scene owed a great debt to the way that DC has used Scarecrow in this Batman villain. And not even so much in the like Nolan movies, because he was there, but they didn't really go like the full
just quick cut. Ooh, that thing looks spooky. But yeah,
exactly.
Getting deep in the psychology of it. Yeah.
But if you ever played the Arkham Batman games, like they would have like Scarecrow levels where like Scarecrow would dose you with the fear gas, and then you'd have to get through an entire level where you're just hallucinating balls. But like the way that you had to get through that was kind of like the same kind of effects. They used the hallucinations in the same way that Mysterio used his illusions. So I thought there was like a debt owed there, even if it was more just kind of similar than purposeful.
Well, even in one of the few audible moments while speaking to my kids, like the Disney Infinity Spider-Man game does that with Mysterio. I'm bet the PS4 one. I'd love to have played it, but I don't own the system. If they don't do it, I think there might have been a DLC. But it's very perfect for that. And again, I don't actually know who came first, Scarecrow or Mysterio. But just like illusions, things that aren't real but are hero things. It's just fantastic storytelling. So I did love that action scene. I think I didn't choose it in part because I don't know, maybe I'm tired of always being the guy that picks the action scene. Maybe I'm tired of you making fun of me. So instead I went with the revelation of Mysterio's plan.
That was good. That was really good. And the thing is, I'm sure that me and you knew that was coming the entire time.
Oh yeah, that was like maybe because it was so satisfying because it happened. The whole conversation is starting to do this. Then Peter's Heminos like, oh, this is what the whole thing has been about. This whole he's just been trying to get him, and then the world washes away, and then there's some people left. And it's like and I'm like, yes, that's what Mysterio is. He's guy who tricks people because he wants money and stuff. Like he was a huckster. And honestly, it was also a little satisfying because a lot of the nerd sites leading up to this movie, like since the trailer, were doing this dumb, I don't know if it was like kayfabe or something, where they were like taking a lot of the movie at face value, trailer, which for two reasons is exceedingly stupid. One, Marvel lies its ass off with its trailers, and for two, you guys should know what Mysterio is. You are a geek site. In fact, they would even sometimes reference, like, oh, hey, Mysterio in this one, but in this, he seems to have mystic powers. And, there must be a multiverse because he said it. And, this is the Hydro Man and just like in the books. Like, it's all bullshit. You know that. Why are we pretending? That's the whole key to Mysterio.
So what's so funny about this that you bring up is when the very first trailer for this movie came out, every reaction I saw to it initially was, oh, okay, so this is all part of Mysterio's plan. That was every reaction. Like, this is all a lie, Mysterio, because it's Mysterio. And I was like, yeah, because that's what Mysterio does. And then I feel like... And I bet this was probably planned because Marvel's like, oh, crap. Like, we can't have everyone just saying this. So I feel like they try to push at their like, oh, multiverse. Because people want to talk about a multiverse because they hate the way time travel worked out in Endgame. So that, I think, was really what kind of got them off this was Mysterio the entire time. Because people wanted to believe in a multiverse.
Yeah, and
but
also,
it was silly.
I suppose the modern way of how movie discourse goes is that they always just have to have content about MCU specifically. Like, it's going to drive so many page views. But and it's like, oh, well, they're tying it in so that Endgame opened up this. No, come on! Why are we doing this? Like, if you were just a mainstream site that you don't know this stuff, cool, man, fine. Yeah. Again, at this point, you should probably have some level of skepticism going back to point A. Marvel just lies in their trailers, but it's fine. But websites that talk about comic books and stuff, we're starting to play it serious. Like, oh, well, maybe in this version, Mysterio. It's like, no. None of that is real. Nothing is real. It's all illusion. That's the entire thing about him.
That's it. That's all.
And that's why when it was revealed, I'm like, oh, that was masterful. That was fantastic. That was perfect.
Yeah. I also just like the fact that like he was working with other people and they were like clapping for him and he was like hamming it up for them. Like, it was a very fun scene in that moment.
Yeah, and just as a scene, like Jake Gyllenhaal played the hell out of it.
Right.
And, you really feel it. And yes, and then it does a good MCU version of making it feel a little more real, because one guy being able to do all this stuff, I mean, whatever, if they explained it to us, we'd believe it. But the fact that we have this guy doing this and we have somebody coming up with a storyline, all this, it's like, that all feels right. I mean, again, none of this can be real, but within the reality of the universe they've created, it's like, oh, that makes sense. So I really like that sequence.
Well, I mean, and the thing that like that sequence also reminded me of was like, it was, how like at the end of a play, you'll have the actors come out and then they like start talking about like, the people we don't see on stage, like, oh, and our fabulous director, our wonderful music coordinator, this and that. Like, that's right. Like, that's the way that he was like talking about these people, which really just means that Mysterio is just a big theater kid. You know, he's just a theater kid grown up.
And then I also like that they tied it into other MCU moments because that's
Yes.
just, I mean, that's fun. That's part of what we've been doing this whole time. It is a part of the success of this franchise is that it keeps borrowing and piecing from there and rewarding you for having been along the journey. So bringing back the scientists from Iron Man and tying it into that moment in Civil War. And it's just like that's great. I love that stuff. It just it enriches the experience of the universe. And frankly, I was a little sad that they didn't have a few more from some of the other people. It's like, oh, this is somebody that Tony also blew off or something.
Yeah.
Because
the thing about it is, like, Tony, he was a dickhead. He made tons of enemies along the way.
Yeah. So that's what I had. And then also a scene that I really liked, just to kind of get into the other strengths of this movie. That yes, the Spider-Man stuff, the Mysterio stuff, but getting back to Peter Parker, all that. I really liked when Peter and MJ were heading out of the hotel to go talk, to have their chat on the bridge, on the bridge, because it just harken back to those feelings, the nervous energy that both of them had, and the stammering, and oh my god, their hands touched and they got a back. I thought that was just exceptionally well done.
No. Their chemistry is really good. Like, it just is.
Yeah. Oh, and frankly, it was the moment where you could tell MJ is actually into him, which was the first time actually in this franchise that I felt like any of the women were. Like, I never got it from Laura Harrier's character. Can't remember her name now, the character's name, and I might have mispronounced the actress's name, in fact. But in the first movie, I never really got like, she was like, "Hey, I kind of like Pete, and I don't want to. I need a date, so sure." But I never really got the sense that she was fully into him.
Right, he was kind of like a safe choice there.
Yeah. Whereas in that moment, just like on Zendaya's face and all of that, it's like, oh yeah, that feels like young people that are going through all this. So I really like that, even more than like even once they start talking, because then it gets into the whole. I mean, it was still a fine scene, but just the lead up is like, I thought that was perfect, and just like the little notes that this movie hits that really helps it. Really like love that sense of place and time that they've created within the Peter Parker story, because frankly I'm a big sucker for teen type stories because they're fun. It's a time in our lives when everything means everything, but the stakes are actually not that high. Melodrama is fun, like we discussed last time, subtext is for cowards. Teenagers don't have time for that sort of thing. So that was just another scene I wanted to highlight.
Okay. Biggest flaw.
So this actually kind of continues off of my best sequence. His motivations for getting Edith, and for playing the trick on Spider-Man and Nick Fury and all that was perfect. It's exactly he had this long-term plan to get this piece of technology that he felt he was wrongly pushed down for or not given proper credit for. I don't think the movie did a good job fleshing out why he goes after that. Why after that? Once he gets Edith, why is he still doing like the syndrome thing? Why is he, suddenly like continuing to be a villain? Because everything before that with the Mysterio seemed to be this con to trick Peter into getting the glasses. And frankly, maybe it wasn't Peter at first. Maybe he thought he was tricking Nick Fury, but like getting this technology, you have it now. Why is now your goal of this technology to trick the world into thinking you're a hero? And like, obviously we can like easily explain ego and all that, but I don't feel like the movie explained why that. And moreover, it didn't explain why he's suddenly cool with just killing a lot of people. And I don't even mean necessarily Peter and his friends. That's, oh no, I'm going to get caught in my whole elaborate plan. Something has to happen. Like he was just cool. A bunch of people in London dying. It's like, why did he suddenly turn like maniacal? And I don't feel like the movie, kind of going with the theme earlier, there's implications here that the movie didn't really want to get bogged down in because they didn't want to hurt their, kind of frothy tone.
Yeah. I can definitely see those. So, I mean, we've kind of hit on all my major negatives, but just I felt that when, the period of the movie when it was trying to be funnier, the first half, I felt there was like large stretches where it just wasn't really working for me in that sense. Like, again, I like the cast. I like what they're doing. I kind of wanted more of the kid cast. I felt the Shield stuff was a little intrusive here. Rather, I guess not Shield, but Nick Fury stuff was like a little intrusive here. And I felt that his energy didn't really mesh well with Peter's energy. except in that first scene when he's confronting him in the bedroom and everyone keeps knocking. Like, that's kind of more the energy that I wanted between them, and it was never really replicated well.
Yeah, maybe the movie would have been better off trying to integrate like Nick Fury's company trying to avoid discovery, like they did in that scene, like trying to pull off their thing while also still remaining, hidden. That might have also matched the tone a bit better in the film.
Yeah, and so because of that, like I felt for like a while, like like the big like elemental battles, were like we're kind of like serious, like big battles, but I felt like the stuff leading up to them I didn't care about as much.
And actually, to that point, I felt like the movie didn't do a good job explaining Spider-Man's roles in those big battles.
Right, because
so
what is he doing there exactly?
Yeah, and obviously the water one, he's there, it happens,
right.
And he's trying to help people. Yeah, perfect. That's hero motivation. Now, because it's the introduction of Mysterio, at least to that character, we get him in the the cold open, I guess.
Right.
But it's it's more highlighting what Mysterio can do against such a character, because it's like we never really get fully like Peter, Spider-Man title character figuring out what to do in a fight against water. Right. But okay, that's fine. It's really the scene's about introducing Mysterio, but it's like we need you. It has to be you. It's all about you. We're gonna disrupt your whole classification so you can play lookout. Like I feel like
or like crowd control. What is he doing there?
Like I feel like you people probably could have managed that.
There. Like I don't. I mean, like I don't know. It was. Yeah. No, you're right. His role made like no sense.
Yeah, and it's just because the movie is still trying to. This is all about the illusion, but yeah, I think they could have done a better job, and thus maybe the shield parts would have felt into it. It's like, why Spider-Man? Why superhero at all? Why not just you guys and Vec? I mean, it seemed to work in that other town. Yeah, and again, like we know why later is because Vec is really just trying to get Spider-Man.
Right.
But they probably should have found him something a little bit better to do, a villain that he could fight. And frankly, like obviously, like Spider-Man has fought a Molten Man in the comics, has fought a Hydro Man, but this movie never really got to it. Let's pause here so you can see your dog for a second.
Yeah.
And then when we come back, we'll get into our big idea and a little discussion about the post-credit sequence.
So nice to finally meet you, Spider-Man.
You're Nick Fury.
Put some clothes on. Let's go for a ride.
Is he gonna be okay like that?
Might want to turn him over so he doesn't swallow his tongue.
Hello, welcome back. We're here. Let's start that over again. And we're back, and we're talking about our big idea. So our big idea this week is we're talking about Spider-Man. We're 5 movies into this MCU version of him. I kind of want to talk about what the MCU has done that is different than the other iterations, and not just the other iterations we've seen on film, but his traditional characterization in the comics, and have those changes damage this character. So, you want to start us off? You want me to?
I'll go. And let's just state first off, I love this character. I really enjoy what the MCU has done. I feel like their Peter Parker is just a fun character to experience in movies. I also want to recognize the fact that like this is the 3rd movie franchise version of him. Now, I guess 4th if you want to include the Spider-Verse version.
Yeah, it's true.
And on top of that, several cartoons, and obviously decades and decades of comic books. So I think there was a need for them to do something different. I don't, they couldn't just do what we know of Spider-Man, because I mean, Sam Raimi kind of did that. There was ways to improve what Sam Raimi did, but they needed, and we discussed this the first time we talked about Homecoming. They needed to justify the existence of a 3rd franchise within, a 15-year span or something, right? And I think the changes that they did to this Peter, and some of it, just like, bringing him back to high school and all of that, but also the way they integrated him as in the MCU and made the MCU an essential part of his story, I think has given us a different experience. And frankly, is this as close to the comic book? Maybe, maybe not. It also should be noted that there's not exactly a singular comic book characterization of somebody who's been written by, probably 5 dozen different people, and had several different stories in several different universes told about him. But it's the one I like best of any of the movie ones. I like this one best. So, I think what I enjoyed what they've done, but there may be other things to talk about as well. How about yourself?
So I definitely agree with the point that after 2 other movie franchises, we kind of need a different take on him anyway. And as you said, the Sam Raimi one was the one that was very traditional to the comics, very beholden to them. So it wouldn't just be enough to make this Peter Parker younger again. We couldn't just have high school Sam Raimi version. I don't think that would really give it a lot of juice. And one of the things I really appreciate about this movies is it's not just it's not just kind of a different Peter Parker characterization, but we're also getting different villains than we've ever seen before. And we're kind of getting different aspects of the Spider-Man, mythos and all that. And importantly, I don't think like you said, I don't think there is one characterization of Spider-Man. I think there are certain things that are typical of him. But I think there are always kind of these different Spider-Mans that are written by different writers. And the one that you identify as the true Spider-Man is usually going to be the one that you responded to probably when you were at an impressionable age and it made an impression on you. So I do think that these movies capture a characteristic of Spider-Man that's important. But they also do, and I think the fact that, that one of the big criticisms of them is that they're not really Spider-Man movies. They're Iron Man movies, especially with Homecoming. Though, frankly, I thought Iron Man was almost even more present in this movie, despite the fact he was never in this movie.
His shadow looms large, definitely.
His shadow looms large. But I also think that the choice there is because of what the Marvel movies are trying to do now, which is they recognize that they are in a shared universe and that superheroes can appear in other superhero properties, which is something that really excited people early on. And then all of a sudden in Spider-Man is one that's oh, well, this is now a Tony Stark movie, not a Spider-Man movie, which, I think that's fair because Spider-Man's a character that can carry a movie on his own. We want to see Spider-Man carry a movie on his own. But it's also the uniqueness of this take on Peter Parker is the fact that he can interact with other superheroes. So I do think you want to see that.
So I think what's really different about this, and I'm honestly just coming up with this now, listening to you and having said some else, I think this is the very first Spider-Man portrayal, at least Peter Parker Spider-Man portrayal, where he joins an existing universe of superheroes. Yeah. When Spider-Man was created, he came after the Fantastic Four, but months after the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four appear in the 4th issue of the comic, I believe. So it wasn't really an established superhero universe, except in the sense that, this is a universe with superheroes. But it was the birth of, the superhero Marvel comic universe, or at least the rebirth following the World War II stuff. Right. Every other movie, Spider-Man is the only hero in the universe. Any other cartoon presentation, this is Spider-Man, and sometimes they would then bring other characters in, but the universe is being established as Spider-Man introducing the world to super powered stuff. Even the Ultimate Universe, which reboots Spider-Man and did some of these things, he was the start of the Ultimate Universe. The X-Men came a little later, and then even then they were siloed a bit from my understanding of it anyway. I've read the Ultimate Spider-Man ones, not as much as the X-Men ones. But this is the first time where Spider-Man was the latecomer to the party, and I think that might be what's different about it. And I think that's a thing that they had to reckon with. They couldn't just start up with like Spider-Man being in his own little world, not interacting with different characters, because that he was entering a world in which superheroes had preceded him and established what the worldview of that sort of superhero would be. So it only makes sense for him to be a response to that. And you see that in Homecoming with him making his own, crappy little superhero costume. You see that in the way that everybody around him discusses it. And then it made sense that Tony Stark could help bring him into this, especially in the fact that the MCU is a universe where, like, unlike the conceit of comic books, where as soon as you decide to become a superhero or a supervillain, because you've gained powers or you just have a special talent that you want to use, you also seem to have the preternatural ability of cosplay. Just like, you can just invent whatever costume you want.
Right.
Materials just happen, the acquisition of material is immaterial in these worlds. And again, if you're reading comic books, you just got to accept that. Some modern comic books have tried to do a bit more of a realistic approach, but it's just like, it's weird how everybody can sew so well. I don't know why a teenager would have that ability. And if you really are complaining about the fact that his suit came from Tony Stark, I hope you fucking loved when like 15 minutes of Amazing was dedicated to Andrew Garfield, experimenting with various like loser suits. I'm fine that they skip that, but the MCU is a world where like nobody has created their own costumes besides Tony Stark. He has outfitted the superheroes of at least of the Earth MCU, other than Shield maybe giving a couple.
Well, Tony Stark and his father.
Yes, there you go. Oh yeah, previous Captain America. And actually, interestingly, in Avengers, it wasn't Tony Stark, it was Shield. Yet in Endgame, I might have abused the term interestingly just now, but in Endgame, then suddenly Tony Stark is like, "Oh, Cap, I really let you down." I guess we'll just no prize that is Cap. That was Tony Stark consulting when they were redesigning the Captain America costume. Anyway. But yeah, like if that's the sort of thing that bothers you, that like Spider-Man isn't making his own super suit, I feel like that is actually well within the realm of understanding of what is possible in this universe, that like not everybody could just create a super suit. And it should be noted, Peter Parker still created the webs and he still created a suit. It's just one that was more believable that a teenager would be capable of doing, especially not a teenager of extraordinary means.
Actually reminded me of the early suit in the Raimi one. In Spider-Man 1, he kind of has like a few suits, and like it's like they get slightly better as he goes along.
Well, they become amazingly, near the end, it's like this plastic, web.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Again, how really? And again, if you're just a comic fan, it's just like, how is because. That's why. But in this universe, they haven't had that. So it made sense that, Tony Stark gave it to him. Let's skip ahead and not have to worry about, how he makes a costume. But interestingly, in this film, they have Peter make a costume, but it's with all of Tony Stark's technology. And it's just like, is that just what it's going to be now? That like I was fine with him getting one. I was even fine with him getting the armor or whatever, especially if it's in the Avengers. But it's just like always just going to be like Peter Parker or, down to earth, friendly neighborhood superhero, teenager, but also can just call upon James Bond level gadgetry whenever he's in a jam.
And I think that is where the Tony Stark reliance in this franchise does hurt it a bit, because it feels like there's a giant safety net under this Peter Parker where he can't really fail too much, because Tony Stark and the Tony Stark support system around him is always going to be there to pick him up. And I think this manifests itself not just in the like superheroing, but also in the personal life, where like, Peter is like comes from a poor family. He usually struggles with like money problems. Like this is like a going concern that, like Peter's personal life constantly conflicts with his superhero life, and he's always like torn between the two, and he's usually making the superhero choice to the detriment of his personal life, whether that be the fact that he can't earn a lot of money, or he's letting his girlfriend of the time down or whatever. But here it seems that like he doesn't have that choice, because the Tony Stark support system, whether that be Happy or the suits or whatever is always there to catch him if he falls.
Mhm.
And so there's some tension lost there because how much can Peter really fail in these ones? He could fail to stop a bad guy, but that's true of any superhero. One of the delights of Spider-Man is the fact that he's balancing the superhero stuff against the very real personal stuff that we all recognize. I have to get to my date on time. I have to, it's like, I have to get money for, Aunt
I don't want
May's,
to be a superhero this summer. I just want to talk to this girl I like. Yeah.
Right, which is the one aspect that they did here. But again, like it's less about there. It's less about failing and more just about like I just want to live my life for a second. And so there is this kind of lost tension, and I feel like that is a more traditional Peter characterization that we have kind of lost in this one with its reliance on Iron Man, but then it also like we haven't seen this Spider-Man just stand by on his own,
Yeah.
And I feel that one thing this movie did well was like the way that he beat the bad guy in the end was mostly of his own doing. He was able to come up with this. He was able to come up with a plan. Like, he started to stand on his own in a way that like the conclusion of Homecoming didn't really show. Like, honestly, he kind of beat Vulture by luck in Homecoming. From what I remember, I actually kind of don't even really remember the final scene there.
Yeah, the plane crashing and
yeah, but here, like he kind of came up with the plan, so we kind of saw him take those steps. And where I hope this character is going is more self-sufficiency. But I also wanted to bring up something else from your earlier point that I think also kind of explains some of the differences. In the comics, Spider-Man, while he does cross over with other people, he's also very siloed because he is popular enough that he doesn't have to have people crossing over into his comics. He crosses over into other people's comics to give them a sales boost, to give them juice. Like he'll be on the Fantastic Four or the Avengers for a time to juice their sales. He doesn't need anyone coming into his comics to juice his sales because everyone loves Spider-Man. So like if you're just reading a Spider-Man comic, you're just reading about Spider-Man. So the idea of Spider-Man existing within a larger world, while it has a comic precedent, is also kind of odd. Because if you're just reading the Spider-Man like stories, there's not a lot of other superheroes in there. It's mostly just Spider-Man.
Unless you're reading Marvel Team Up, in which case they paired him with other superheroes all the time. But again, that was so those other heroes could rub off his shine, not the inverse.
Right. Because in the comics, there is no one in Marvel Comics with a bigger shine than Spider-Man. No one hero that you could argue the X-Men have a bigger shine, but they are a team.
Yeah.
And so because of that, he occupies this odd place where he is one of the most popular heroes, but he's also by far not the most powerful hero. And in fact, like every time he does join a team, it's like he's popular, but he's also like, like for a while he was like always the junior member or whatever. Like, now I feel like now in the modern day he has more respect, but for a while it was kind of like, like he's not a full Avenger or whatever. So I think like there's the difference there where it's like, whereas here it's like, oh, well, he is the heir apparent to the biggest superhero on the planet.
Yeah. So I think what it is less that he didn't have his standing on his own. It's that he took a step back, and the Ant-Man and the Wasp had the same issue.
Yeah.
Is that the arc of Peter Parker in Homecoming was, he's this protege, and he's trying to push up against the limits that's put on him by kid, don't worry about it, we got this. No, I got it. Right. But in the end, no Tony Stark suit, no Tony Stark. He did it on his own, right? And it's showing that what made him special wasn't the suit; it was him. That was the journey. And then all of a sudden, he goes into Endgame and gets Infinity War, he gets a fancier suit and all of that. But it's like, okay, fine, that's the crossover. But then suddenly in this one, it felt like the arc should have been, Tony Stark is he going to be the next Tony Stark? Are you the next Tony Stark? And it should have been, I'm not the next Tony Stark. I'm the first Spider-Man.
Right.
But no, he's suddenly constructing a Spider-Man suit with, Led Zeppelin play. So it's like, wait, I guess he is the next Tony Stark? Like, honestly, like the thing with Edith should have been at the end, I don't need this. This is too much. I don't want this. Yeah. I'm going to be Spider-Man.
No one should have this. No, exactly. No one. I mean, yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, and it kind of really, like, it didn't. I mean, and that's like a big flaw in the movie to me. Like that, and I don't think that's just a flaw because of who Spider-Man always is. I think it's a flaw because of where Homecoming left him, as you said. Like it took a real step back in this movie, and unlike Ant-Man, where the step back was just status quo, I feel like this took a step back by like reversing the course of the decisions he made. So.
Yeah. And it's like, I think that's where like the MCU, trappings really held this one back to the degree that it held it back. Because I should reiterate, because we've been discussing different things, because I've been relating to things you brought up. I still found this an incredibly enjoyable experience throughout, and ready for the next Spider-Man movie, especially if the next one is Spider-Man.
Should we talk about the next one? I feel like we've been hinting around this long enough.
I want to just a little bit more about what the MCU's done, because I think they are nitpicky things that are whatever. Who cares that Aunt May is younger? I think they've created a fun dynamic for Aunt May that I think has given this Peter Parker more fun things to do with. He has enough of the hiding his identity and other things. They don't need that story aspect within the 2 hours they have every few years. And again, I like that he's in high school again, even though while people say that's essential to Peter Parker, it was like I think 20 issues in the original one. He was always more like young adult, which back then maybe made you seem. Well, even then, he was wearing suits and ties because they didn't understand what young people were like. Or back then, young people didn't know how to be good young people. But yeah, it's just like I felt the MCU was more intrusive in the sense that this was supposed to be his time to stand on his own. Yeah. But I think because this movie within the overall franchise had to play as the denouement to everything that happened in Endgame, it felt it was getting in the way, and again, I think this will be the last time we have to deal with the Tony Stark stuff. I doubt in 4 years.
You never know. I mean, come on now.
And honestly, here's another question. Like the question, like, oh, all right, are you leading the Avengers now? On the face of it, seems kind of ridiculous because he's a kid and all that. But like, who is leading the Avengers
no idea.
now? Yeah, like it's not Iron Man, it's not Captain America, it's not Black Widow, it's not Thor. It's like it's probably not Hulk. He's injured. I bet Hawkeye's done. So it's like I guess it's not as ridiculous. It should be Falcon probably.
Probably.
With all this,
that would make sense. Black Panther, would have the stature, but I don't think you would want that.
No, he's the sovereign leader of another nation. I think, the conflict of interest and all that. Honestly, I didn't think with are you the next Iron Man? Like, shouldn't Rhodey start to be insulted by all this? Like, hey, I've been the next Iron Man for the past 5 years, y'all. What up? I don't know why I made Rhodey say what up, but but yeah, like so, by and large, like when it's Tom Holland doing the things and like being with the classmates and all that, I feel like the MCU just really nailed a great like version, an idea of Spider-Man that I think plays well with the traditional idea, plays well with the modern traditional, like the post-Ultimate Spider-Man world, and also is enough of its own thing that it justifies its own existence. But I do feel more so than in Homecoming, where it didn't really bother me other than like I could have done like one less Iron Man scene. It felt intrusive in this because it felt like it was holding him back. Now there's also like kind of like a metatextual level to like everything that's going on with that that Marvel is also looking for the next Tony Stark within their universe. Like Robert Downey Jr. was the biggest connective tissue of their entire first 20 films. And now it's like, is it going to be Spider-Man? But the problem is I feel like I doubt it's going to be because you don't own him completely.
So I actually have a theory about that. Hold on. So I don't know this for sure, but I bet they have a deal with Sony because everything I heard about the Sony deal was, they get 3 Spider-Man movies. But You know what that doesn't preclude? Spider-Man appearing in team ups from now to infinity, because the Hulk, they didn't have the rights to make a Hulk movie for a bit, or like they had to share those rights, but they could still use Hulk in their own stuff, you know. And so I think that they're going to still be able to use Spider-Man in like other Avengers and other team ups and all that, even if they can't make another solo Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, and it's always be even interesting, like, what's Tom Holland's contract? Like, could Sony just use him in their own without Disney, or is he signed to like Disney, or like both? I don't know.
Right.
Interestingly, like, I wonder is also like, is this why Spider-Man is a little dependent on the rest of the MCU, and that they're not motivated to create a Spider-Man that can be so separated from it. Like,
that
he needs to be intertwined, because it's like, hey, we're making the MCU Spider-Man. If you want a not MCU Spider-Man, you guys are on your own.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. I mean, but again, that is the one strength they have. Like, they can make a Spider-Man that is more in a connected universe than anyone has ever before, or probably will ever again, because like, when are you ever going to get to see a Spider-Man on film that can interact with the other big Marvel heroes? The answer is it's only going to happen this way.
But yeah, like, I'm ready for Spider-Man that stands on his own. I'm ready for a Spider-Man whose villains are, his villains instead of, Tony Stark villains. And here's the thing about that.
Though I really love the running theme of Spider-Man having to clean up Tony Stark's messes.
Yeah. Although here's the thing, like, as much as Vulture, like, had sympathetic reasons and explaining, like, he went and did the exact reason why the government shouldn't have ever been trusting that cleanup to a bunch of independent contractors in the first place. Like, this is why you need to have Stark doing it, because you can't just have anybody touching this stuff. What if they turn into supervillains? They created the thing they were trying to prevent. But yeah, like, about the future of Spider-Man having his own villains, we might be headed down that path because of the mid-credit sequence. And I wanted to talk a bit about the two post-credit sequence we have here. So I guess if you left before that happened, these are big spoilers for that. But if you left before that happened, why are people still doing that?
I see it every movie, and I'm kind of like, I guess that people are just want to watch this on YouTube or something, but I really don't understand it, because that this happens in every movie. Like, this is a thing they do.
Yeah, now the only reason I could say why, and this will get into why I want to discuss these ones specifically, is sometimes they're like nothing, right? The last one was hanging around to hear Tony Stark banging on tin in the cave. Not even seeing it, just hearing it. The last one for this movie was Captain America making fun of you for having hung around.
That's true.
Like, in general, these final scenes are just kind of light little fun gags. We played with that format, before, when we used to do that sort of thing. But not this movie. Are these the two most like impactful post-credit scenes in terms of like, tying up loose ends, telling full-on stories, setting the franchise in motion in like MCU history?
So I would say the fact that both of them do it is unique. A couple other MCU movies have one post-credit scene, or usually the mid-credit scene, that is like actually like really important. So for instance, Ant-Man and the Wasp had, Ant-Man going into the quantum realm, and then everyone outside it gets dusted, right? And so he's stuck there, which is important for I guess Endgame. Right? Yeah,
it was basically the entire fate of half of the universe hung on that moment.
Captain Marvel had her showing up, which was a scene that we didn't actually get to see in Endgame. We had the obvious one is the first time we saw Nick Fury. That was a big one. And then the other one I'd bring up is we had I guess it was Winter Soldier one, where it showed the creation of Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. Kind of the creation. It showed them in the cell.
Yeah, was that Winter Soldier? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
I think that's Winter Soldier.
It must have been one or two, because then they show like Bucky in the. I don't know. Yeah.
They showed Bucky in the museum as well. So that's like two like actual like meaningful post-credit scenes, which is a bit rare. Though the Bucky in the museum one is more kind of interesting than like that meaningful. I think Civil War also had like Bucky and Wakanda. That one meant something. So like usually there's one, but this one had two. And like the mid credits one is one that, in my opinion, should not have been a mid credits. That should have been in the movie proper, because that's not just an important scene. Like that isn't just like, oh, like this is kind of pointing to where this is going. Like that is like a key like capstone to this movie. Like that is the end of this movie. That is the button you want to end on. I think it's kind of a disservice. Like, look, I understand everyone stays around for, they want people to stay around for the credits, all that. But you want them to get like a cool extra or like a cool reveal or an idea of where something's going. This is like the end of the movie. This isn't an idea. It's not just where this is going. This is the end of the movie.
Yeah, and it's about as impactful as anything besides I want to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. And also, like, yeah, everybody knows they should stick around. Apparently, they were still like I don't know, either...
I saw half my theater leave.
Yeah, but like reviewers who've complained about like a plot thread dropped. It wasn't dropped. It was in the mid-credits sequence. Like the fact that like, Mysterio's main henchman like is doing something and then walks away. Like that's tied up here. Like that is a major part, not just of the next movie, but of this movie. And then of course, it ends on what is going to be the central tension for the like next part of this character, and also possibly the other best moment of the movie that we did to talk about in the sequences, which was, oh my God, J.K. Simmons is back as J. Jonah Jameson.
Yay! No, it's great to see him back. He's the only one. I mean, he's not the only one that complained, but he's the only one I want to see now. Yeah.
Well, he was just so perfect. Like there might not be superhero casting as good as J.K. Simmons and as J. Jonah Jameson anywhere, and I'm including Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man and things of that ilk. So seeing him again was perfect. And then the world knows about Peter Parker and Spider-Man. That's like huge. Now, there are ways of undoing this. Bruce Wayne would sometimes show up dressed as Superman to get people off the trail of Clark Kent. So I'm not saying this is necessarily a permanent thing, because I hope this wouldn't lead to, say, Peter Parker having to undo his relationship with MJ by selling it to the devil, which is how they had to do it in the comic books. Yeah. But like that's huge. And again, like the reveal of that is more sticking to this is what the next movie is going to be about. Oh my God, I don't want to see it. But like, just tying up the loose end of his, with the henchman and all that, that is an essential ingredient to the movie, not just like a little add-on. So to me, like the fact that was a mid-credit did kind of bug me a little bit. But also it's like, we've been hitting around, but like, this gives us, it's like what this should lead to is a chance to see Spider-Man stand on his own, because this could be like outlaw Spider-Man. Like this could be Spider-Man is hunted by the government. We could have Ross come after Spider-Man for like not signing the Accords or whatever, and like maybe he has someone hunting Spider-Man who just who just happens to be some sort of good hunter guy. Yes. That is a possibility. I mean, it's fantastic. And I think another reason why this happened with both of these, and God help me right now, I'm forgetting the post-credits. The post-credit was basically that Nick Fury. Nick Fury wasn't in this movie. Yeah. Okay, that that is a little more aligned, except that it was kind of also pretty essential to the movie, because another tension that's going on, a thing that probably might have bugged some people, bugged me a little bit, I've seen it bug other people, is while "bitch, you've been in space" is a fun line, that never felt like Nick Fury. The whole movie, you're kind of feeling like has the MCU forgotten what Nick Fury is like? So putting that on the end, it's like, oh, good, they didn't. It felt like he had kind of lost a step, like that Nick Fury was showing his age, or a little bit. And they explain it with like one piece of dialogue, like I was missing for 5 years and it's hard to catch up. I used to know everything, I know nothing. But even just like the way he was acting didn't feel quite Nick Fury. And then so having that scene is like, oh, okay, good. It's not Nick Fury. Now again, that one like it's fine as a post credit. It's just like both ones were like pretty essential for the full understanding of the movie in a way that like a lot of these post-credit sequences aren't.
Right. Well, and the other thing the Nick Fury one did was it showed actual Nick Fury in what looked like a spaceship, working with other Skrull, and it's like, is this Sword? Are we finally getting Sword?
Yeah, what's going on? And like that's the thing. Like both of the like that one. Oh, so the mid one had to hint at the next Spider-Man. This one may be questions about where the rest of the Marvel universe is going, which is kind of important because for the first time in like 10 years, we don't know what's next. We literally do not know what the next MCU movie is. We know about ones they're working on at some level, but the next one in theaters, no idea. In fact, like that made for a weird theater going experience because there was no trailer. They were not setting the next thing up. I sat there with my 6-year-old kid in his first movie, seeing like Terminator trailers, and I think there's the Manson Family movie trailer.
Oh, I didn't get that one. That's a weird one, but okay.
Yeah, no. I mean, ultimately, it's a trailer that never really gets into what it's truly about because they assume the audience knows, so my kids don't, and that's fine. But yeah, like there's no next movie. We don't know what's up. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, no, it's very weird. Now, I think there are some good guesses, and in fact, I think the post-credits scene could hint at the next movie being one that me and you have kind of discounted for a bit, which is the Eternals. Is that no, not the
Eternals is one.
Wait, that's okay. Yeah,
that's what it's called.
Okay, I wasn't, for some reason I had doubt there. Because that's a space-based franchise, and maybe what that Nick Fury sequence is setting up is something is leading into that. And the other big contender, I think, is the Black Widow movie, just because that is in production.
Yeah, if I had to place bets,
that'd be my favorite.
That's the next one, and again, it's not really one you set up because it's set in the past. It also feels like one they could film faster than some of these other ones because it should be. I was gonna say it should be less reliant on special effects, but I guess it'll all depend on how much de-aging they feel like they need to do.
And I don't know I don't know how time-consuming the de-aging technology that they do is.
But yeah, so we don't know where the MCU is going, which means if we want to keep doing this podcast, we got to come up with something new.
Yeah. So what are we going to be doing the rest of the summer?
Next summer, probably leading into the fall, and who knows? Maybe until the next movie is in theaters in 2020. We are going to dive into Fox's X-Men universe, which pretty much is dead now. Asterix, maybe not.
The New Mutants. We'll see. You didn't think Dark Phoenix was going to come out, and that came out.
I mean, that was mostly hopeful, and once it got to a certain stage, I'm like, okay, they'll put it out. But I also liked making fun of how often they put it back. So yes, it made an inglorious end in some ways this summer. We want to talk about the entire journey because in many ways it was the precursor to what we've done. It's I'd say almost definitely the second most successful superhero universe. Because
especially in terms of movies, like no other franchise has put out more than 3, I don't think, and this has put out
well, I was thinking even
7?
just big. Well, that's the thing. We'll get into that in a second. But bigger universe because like the DC universe has not been this successful. It can still get there, right? I'd say Sonyverse didn't get to be that level. Again, maybe it could get there, but this was the first real attempt at doing that. They did it obviously first in the more traditional way of just sequels, but then they expanded out, and we will as well. So we will cover the first 3. God help me, all 3 of the original trilogy. We will cover the 4 of the sort of reboot trilogy, and we will probably delve into the side tracks of the 3 Wolverine movies and 2 Deadpool movies.
There's going to be some highs, and there are going to be some lows.
Yes, it will not be various versions of you and I just talking about how much we enjoyed, and even when it wasn't that great, we still like it. This will not be that.
No. We're actually going to be coming after some of these movies pretty hard.
Yeah.
So,
but I do think it'll be worth seeing where superhero movies of the modern era kind of started. And everybody right now who is going, no, it didn't start with X-Men. It started. I'm going to get into that. We will be getting into that, and the very next movie we will discuss probably sometime in August. I'm guessing we'll start right at the beginning with 2000's X-Men.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to go back to that because I have not seen that movie in a very long time. Kind of like when we were doing, when we began this podcast, when we were going through the early MCU, I was like, oh, I haven't seen this one in a while. I want to see what I think of it now. I am excited to see what I think of that one because I remember liking it, but I also remember it being a little looser than, not as good as it was the first time I saw it. And that was years ago now. So,
yeah. And then one other caveat, which I'll get into when we discuss that first podcast. So with the MCU, we were trying to do a little different. That we are fans of the MCU. I obviously have some superhero base, but they still weren't like the characters that I felt a little more beholden to or protective of, because I grew up an X-Men fan, and I have, hundreds of X-Men comics, as anybody who's helped me move over the past 20 years would tell you. So I can't pretend to be that. I was very deeply into X-Men. I still feel like I have the perspective of understanding what is a movie and what is a different medium, but since that is who I am, we also will lean into that a bit in different and creative ways. So hopefully you guys will join us. We will kind of, as we get closer to when the podcast will release, we'll give you a bit of idea of when you should be watching along with us if that's what you choose to do. Yeah. And where would we tell them about that?
You can find us at our website, which is
InfinityStonePodcast.wordpress.com.
You can tell we're pros at this. You could follow us on Twitter, though Andy never wants to say our Twitter handle because it is just too good, because it's pod_infinity. It's really
Which is perfect, of course, for the X-Men, too. Maybe this is the time we should find another Twitter handle with some kind of X-Men theme name, because I'm sure those are readily available. Certainly probably aren't a lot of X-Men fans on the Twitter machines.
Definitely.
And obviously, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can subscribe on iTunes. I guess it won't be called the Apple Podcast app, because iTunes is dying, much like the X-Men Cinematic Universe, and various other podcatchers. So look out for that, and hopefully you'll join us on.
Yeah. See you next time.